Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another National Zoning Atlas Metro Area Snapshot. I'm Sarah Bronin and pleased to welcome you today for our latest on the Bay Area in California. I wanted to get started by first talking about our really great partners on this effort. So California as a state, probably many of you on this call already know, has extremely complicated zoning and lots of California specific quirks, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in the presentation today. Because it is so complicated, we have really relied heavily on support from our partners based in California. So I really wanted to thank the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative for providing funding that has helped us to keep going in California, and as well as the San Francisco Foundation, whose funding really focused on our efforts here in the Bay Area. We'd also like to recognize the contributions of UC Davis and the Berkeley Othering and Belonging Institute. And I think maybe some of their affiliates might be on the call today. We have built on efforts that we made in prior years to start this process. And as experts on the ground, we have really benefited not only from their leadership, but also from their alumni, a couple of whom are on the call today. And I'm sure they'll introduce themselves and explain their connections to some of our teams. We'd also like to thank the Bay Area Council for helping us to publicize this webinar. So as I mentioned, I'm Sarah Bronin, founder of the National Zoning Atlas, and I'm joined today by Tara Safavian and Miri Kim, both of whom have the distinction of being on both sides of our project. So as they'll explain, there are two sides of our project, and Tara and Miri are two of our dual analysts working both on the tech side as well as the geospatial side. So we're really lucky that they are not only based in California, but they've devoted their talents to California. And a shout out to the many team members also located in California that have really built the bulk of the California Atlas. So with that, I'll just provide an overview of the contents for the presentation. First, why the National Zoning Atlas. I'll say a bit about that, why we founded it, what it's for. Second, how we make it. It's really important for us to explain the methodology so that folks on the call, again, some of you I think are highly technical, others may not be, but to provide an overview certainly helps to ground what we've been doing and explain how we've gone about our process. Third, we're going to give you a quick spin around the National Zoning Atlas. Fourth, we will do a deeper dive into how the Bay Area zones, and then I'll come back in towards the end to talk about the National Zoning Atlas in action. So just a brief word about why we are building the National Zoning Atlas in the first place. And it really drew out of an effort actually on the East Coast out of California, out of Connecticut rather, where we had started an advocacy effort in 2020 and realized that we didn't actually have data on the ground to justify what we were calling for, which is zoning reform. We built the Connecticut Zoning Atlas, we got the data, and that has led to significant not only reform, but also information for people to take, whether they're advocates or policymakers or researchers. Overall, from that effort, we realized that a key thing that would be helpful to people not only in Connecticut, but around the country is taking these zoning codes, these inherently technical documents and arcane legal texts, take information from those and centralize it into an online map. We've also felt, I think the demystification of zoning is something that Tara and Miri and our analyst team and our project managers really work to do. They try to standardize the information that we see in the text and in the map so that we can see apples to apples across different geographies. And finally, I think this is maybe my favorite part of our three-part mission, which is to democratize information about zoning. And we really do feel like that aspect of our project, getting information in the hands of people who can really use it is incredibly important. And it's incredibly important as we think broadly about the need for us to continue as members of the public to have good information at every level of government so that we can push for change where we need it. With that, I think we'll go to the next slide and just show you a quick image of the National Zoning Atlas as a whole, so you get a sense of how far we've come. California is nearly done. Actually, some of those large white spaces in California are some of the undone counties. And when it's white on the map, then we haven't completed the analysis yet, but that analysis is actually being posted as we speak. We have completed 13 states, Utah being the last one, and the District of Columbia and California and North Carolina are soon to come. So Tara and Miri will tell you a little bit more about the evolution of our map, but at a very high level, this map shows how much of the country we've started to cover. So with that, I think I'll turn it over and we'll turn it over to start talking about how the atlas is made. I'll go off camera, but please do include your questions in the Q&A of the chat, and we'll look forward to hearing all of those when we come back around. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Tara Safavian, and I am both a zoning and geospatial analyst at the NZA. I actually started my work in California as a student intern with the UC Davis Center for Regional Change. I've mainly worked with jurisdictions in California and Colorado, though I've also done geospatial analyst in several other states, including Florida, New Mexico, and North Carolina. And today I'm going to walk you through how the atlas is built using zoning and geospatial analysis. Excuse me. We start our zoning analysis by identifying jurisdictions. These are the cities, towns, counties, villages, and townships that have zoning authority. Within the Bay Area, we found 69 individual jurisdictions that have the right to exercise zoning. And this image on the right shows a small sample of them. Once we've identified all the jurisdictions with zoning, the next step is to analyze their zoning districts. Here's a screenshot showing 18 of the 36 zoning districts in Berkeley. On the left, you can see their names, and on the right, we've classified them as either primarily residential, mixed with residential, or non-residential. Most of these are base districts, meaning that they form the base or foundational zoning on the map. But near the top of the list, you'll notice a hillside overlay district. Overlays are a unique type of district because they overlay or stack on top of one or more base districts to add extra regulations. Sometimes the rules are more strict and sometimes they're more flexible depending on the purpose of the overlay. Once we confirm that a jurisdiction has zoning, we collect two key components of a complete zoning code, the zoning text and the zoning map. Both are essential. The text tells us what's allowed. It has all the definitions, uses, and development standards for each district, while the map shows us where those rules apply and how much land is allocated to each district. Here you can see the text and map used for our analysis of Mill Valley in Marin. After collecting the map and the code, NZA team members complete two work streams per jurisdiction, text analysis and geospatial analysis. The text analyst reviews the zoning ordinance and systemically logs key data points for every district using the NZA standardized methodology. The geospatial analyst works with the zoning map, and depending on its format, they either digitize a static PDF map or standardize existing GIS data. The results are then integrated into the NZA, producing the final data set you see in the atlas. Now I'm going to hand it over to Miri.
Thanks, Tara. My name is Miri, and I'm also a zoning and geospatial analyst with the NZA. I've also started out as a student intern with the UC Davis CRC, and I've mainly worked with the NZA on California and also did some geospatial analysis in New Mexico and Tennessee. Now we're going to walk through how to use the interactive map and get the most out of its features. If you'd like to follow along with me, head to zoningatlas.org/atlas. You can use a computer or mobile phone, but know the size of the map will be different for both. While you get set up, I'll share the view of the map again at the national scale, including Alaska and Hawaii, with the colored in areas indicating our total progress. You can see that we have 12 states plus DC completely integrated into the atlas. California, North Carolina, and Utah are nearing completion, and many major metro areas are completed, including those in New York, Tennessee, and Texas. These published areas add up to over 8,000 jurisdictions. About 2/3 of these jurisdictions are confirmed to have zoning and have confirmed that in the remaining third do not have zoning. Within the zone jurisdictions, we've analyzed and published over 93,000 zoning districts, and our analysts have read over 97,000 pages of zoning codes. These places are home to more than half the nation's residents and cover over half of its total land. Now let's dive into the interactive map. The map opens at the national scale where the legend reflects the zone status of the jurisdiction in purple and gray. The areas shown in white are yet to be analyzed and integrated into the NZA. If you have tribal land and protected land layers on, you will also see these green-brown layers. This is most visible in the western states. In the Legend and Layer options box in the upper left corner, you have a few options to toggle on and off additional layers and features. You can also change the base map here. Now we'll use the zoom and filter box to explore a chosen geography. We selected California in the state dropdown, and the map zoomed out to that state. We have the option to be even more specific with our geography selection. We selected San Francisco, Oakland, Fremont in the Metro Micropolitan Area dropdown. Then we selected San Francisco County in the County dropdown, and lastly, San Francisco in the Jurisdiction dropdown. The map zoomed to the city of San Francisco and outlined the jurisdiction in black. Please note that you can only select one jurisdiction at a time. At this scale, notice that the legend updates to show zoning district type. Light purple areas indicate primarily residential districts, meaning these districts are primarily zoned for residential uses. Dark purple areas indicate mixed with residential districts, meaning these districts allow a mix of residential and non-residential uses. Tan areas indicate non-residential districts, meaning residential as a primary use is prohibited. These are typically zones allowing industrial uses or other non-residential uses like airports or open space. Now let's apply fillers to the map. The Show Me Where People Can Build box has options for quick filtering, like to show where missing middle housing or apartments are allowed. We toggled on the single-family homes filter, and you can see the map lost some color. Areas remain colored in when their criteria satisfy the selected filters. In other words, this means that you can build a single-family home anywhere the map is light or dark purple. In the lower right corner, the filtering results box calculates the zone acres and number of districts that satisfy the filtering criteria. According to these results, 76% of zone areas in San Francisco allow single-family housing by right. Note that the filtering results only shows calculations for the single selected jurisdiction. Using the Show Me Where People Can Build box, we can toggle the Apartments tab to view where 4 or more family housing is allowed by right. The filtering results box shows that 84% of San Francisco zone acres allow for this type of housing, which is higher than single family. Now let's look at the Advanced Filters box. You should use it for selecting more specific filtering criteria, like whether 1, 2, 3, or 4 plus unit housing is also subject to a public hearing, minimum parking requirements, or height caps, among other options. We've selected criteria where 4 plus family housing is allowed as of right and has a minimum lot size requirement of 2,000 square feet. According to the filtering results, only 1% of zoned acres in San Francisco satisfy this criteria.
Now that we've covered how the atlas is built, let's talk about something unique to the Bay Area. San Francisco is an uncommon type of jurisdiction. It's both a city and a county, like Denver, Colorado. San Francisco's zoning is uniquely permissive for urban development. 91% of its residential land allows by right development of 4+ family housing. This figure is greater than its allowance for single-family housing, which is permitted on 82% of residential land. However, it's important to note that areas on the western coast of the city are under the jurisdiction of the California Coastal Commission, or CCC, meaning that they're under more stringent developmental regulations and will likely require a public hearing. Additionally, California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA regulations, can also require public hearings and prolonged development. We do not factor CCC or CEQA provisions into our analysis unless they are directly incorporated into zoning regulations. On a positive note, the city's lack of residential parking requirements ensures that the very valuable real estate of San Francisco is prioritized for people and not for cars. Lastly, SF also has minimum density and minimum bedroom requirements in residential areas within its astounding 250 zoning districts. San Francisco has many specialized districts that contribute to its 250 zones. These specialized districts often act as overlays and affect very small areas. In SF, multiple overlays will often affect a single area. For example, this highlighted block here is regulated by the RH2 base district as well as 3 overlays. Each of these overlays, and of course its base district, limits residential development in some way. We refer to each unique combination of base and overlay districts as a slice. A high number of slices can be a symptom of overregulation. San Francisco has a staggering 11,686 unique slices. For comparison, New York has 3,246 slices, and Los Angeles 1,907. So the city of LA is 10 times the size of San Francisco, and yet San Francisco has 10 times the slices of Los Angeles. All right, so now that we've seen the map, let's take a look at how the Bay Area zones. Colloquial definitions of the Bay Area vary greatly. Today, we are broaching the census-defined San Francisco metropolitan area, which includes Alameda, Contra Costa, Marin, and San Mateo counties, and of course, the city county of San Francisco. Notably, this excludes Santa Clara, Sonoma, and Solano counties, which means that these counties are also excluded from our statistics. Across all 69 jurisdictions with zoning in the Bay Area, we analyzed a total of 23,655 pages of zoning code. On average, that's 342 pages of text per jurisdiction, which is a good reminder of how detailed and varied these local codes can be. And for each of the 2,502 zoning districts across the metro, we logged up to 200 distinct data points. Here's the atlas zoomed into the Bay Area. As we mentioned before, there are 69 jurisdictions that make up the metro. This includes all the incorporated city governments and unincorporated county governments. All 69 jurisdictions have zoning as is required by state law, and these are all filled in purple. Now let's break down the land categories across the metro. 30% is designated as protected land and 7% is unzoned land, which includes right-of-ways. That leaves 64% of the metro subject to zoning. Of that 64% of zoned land, 90% allows for some form of residential development. And remember, that means any district that's either primarily residential or mixed with residential. So only about 10% of land doesn't allow residential development. These areas are typically reserved for commercial, industrial, or conservation uses. This housing unit allowances table shows how much residential land is available for different housing types. From left to right, 1, 2, 3, and 4 or more family housing. The dark blue shows the share of housing allowed by right. The light blue requires a public hearing, and gray is prohibited. It shows that across the metro, 84% of residential land allows 1 unit per lot as of right, meaning single-family homes can be built almost anywhere. By right housing shrinks down to 16% for 2 to 3 family residences. And then it actually goes up incrementally for multifamily housing, with 17% of residential land across the metro allowing 4 or more family development as of right. As a general rule, most residentially zoned land allows single-family homes to be built right. However, multifamily allowances can vary greatly, even among neighboring jurisdictions. So, for example, in San Francisco and Oakland, 91% and 69% of residentially zoned land allows 4+ family development by right. But in Fremont and Concord, 10% and 16%, respectively, of residential land allows 4+ family housing by right. Now let's dig into minimum lot sizes. This chart breaks down the share of land allowing single-family homes by the required size of their lots. Darker shades of green represent larger minimum lot sizes, and lighter shades represent smaller ones. There's quite a bit of variation in the Bay Area's minimum lot sizes. The largest share of the donut tells us that 47% of land allowing one family development requires a lot greater than 80,000 square feet. That's nearly 2 acres. The next largest share of the donut is that 23% of single family zoned land has no minimum lot requirement at all. A lack of minimum lot size, or very small minimum, is much more prevalent in denser urban areas. San Francisco and Oakland, for example, allow single-family homes on small lots in 76 and 57% of their zoned land, respectively. These very large lot sizes, shown in purple here, are typical of agriculturally zoned parcels and timberlands, though they're also common in wealthy and equestrian neighborhoods. As you can see on the map, large lot requirements in the Bay Area grow more prevalent as you go further east and into the Central Valley. Next up is a housing type that's become quite popular, accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. Sometimes called granny flats or in-law suites, these are smaller secondary homes on the same lot as a single-family home. ADU regulations vary across the metro, and this chart shows these differences in shades of orange, with the darker shades representing more permissive policies. They range from allowing ADUs as of right to subjecting them to occupancy restrictions and public hearings. And gray represents the 2% of single-family land that prohibits ADUs entirely. Representing the largest share on the diagram, ADUs are allowed by right in 91% of single-family zoning in the Bay Area. This is to be expected because state law requires jurisdictions to allow ADUs on residential land. 7% of land allows ADUs, but subjects them to certain occupancy restrictions. These restrictions can include requiring the owner to live on the property, prohibiting ADU rentals, or limiting who can occupy the unit, such as only relatives, employees, or elderly tenants. Finally, parking mandates. Across the Bay Area, just over half of residentially zoned land, 51%, requires off-street parking for new homes. This map highlights where housing can be built without parking, which is shown in both light and dark purple. As you can see on the map, residential parking requirements vary greatly from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. San Francisco and Richmond notably have no parking requirements at all. On the other hand, 96% of residential land has a minimum parking requirement in Oakland, and 87% has a parking requirement in Berkeley. While parking might seem like a minor concern, it's a very costly use of very valuable land that could otherwise be used for housing and other community needs. And with that, I'll pass it back to Mary.
Thank you. I'd like now to introduce a tool provided by the NZA called Zoning Snapshots. A zoning snapshot is a visual statistical summary of any jurisdiction, county, metro micropolitan area, or state published to the NZA. We'll now show how they look. Here you see the zoning snapshots for the city of Alameda, Alameda County, and the San Francisco, Oakland, Fremont metro area. With zoning snapshots, you can easily review and compare key zoning statistics across jurisdictions. For example, you can see in the housing units allowed bar charts that single-family housing is allowed on a much greater percentage of land in the county or across the metro, while the city of Alameda has a more even distribution of single and multifamily housing. You can generate your own zoning snapshots by going to zoningatlas.org/snapshots. Or if you're exploring the atlas itself and have a jurisdiction selected, you can scroll down from the map to access buttons that take you to the snapshots. We've selected a couple zoning snapshots to highlight some examples of different housing contexts. Here is the San Francisco-Oakland Metro alongside the cities of Daly City, Oakland, and Hillsborough. Again, the dark blue in these columns shows where housing is allowed by right. In each of these graphs, notice a variety of ways jurisdictions within a single metro approach their housing unit allowances. Four or more family housing is allowed by right in 8% of residential land in Daly City, compared to 69% in Oakland and 0% in Hillsborough. Compare this to the aggregated 17% across the broader metro. Here we can see that the metro as a whole allows for only a fraction of multifamily housing that's otherwise allowed in its single jurisdictions like Oakland, but devotes more of its land to single family than jurisdictions like Daly City. I'll now turn it back to Sarah.
Thanks, you guys. And my last couple of slides are just about the NZA in action. We decided to provide a couple of examples for the convened webinar attendees to show you how we have actually used the National Zoning Atlas in a couple of different ways. We have, and actually I see one of our Connecticut team members in the participants list. In Connecticut, the first zoning atlas to be completed. We used the data to help inform statewide zoning reforms. We saw the same thing in Montana. More recently, we've helped the Texas state legislature understand the impact of bills that would affect manufactured housing related zoning. So this report, which is available on our website, evaluates how that particular piece of legislation, Texas Senate Bill 785, might affect local governments' need to accommodate manufactured housing. I encourage you to check it out as something that very directly informs advocacy. Second, we wanted to point you to a statewide zoning report that we've completed for the state of Colorado. That report details all of the, I guess at a higher level than what we've talked about today, on a statewide basis, all of the quirks and trends in zoning that we saw in that state with 334 jurisdictions. A number of those did not have zoning, so only 275 did not have zoning. Actually, pretty big contrast to California, which is entirely zoned statewide. If we had to write a report for California, we'd see a lot of interesting state-specific issues, as I said from the beginning. But the Colorado report shows you what we can do in a state to summarize what is happening there. That we already know is informing conversations at the State House, and even Governor Polis picked it up as something that he thought could help inform the next steps that they're taking on a statewide basis. We have upcoming reports on Massachusetts as well as Virginia, so stay tuned for the release of those in the next few weeks. And then finally, on the research side, we've conducted research, including with external organizations on a variety of topics. Here we have a screenshot from a report that the Regional Plan Association spearheaded using National Zoning Atlas data in the New York City metro region to really calculate the amount of housing that jurisdictions in the New York City metro area have allowed to be put in harm's way and the opportunities that they have to rezone upland areas to better provide housing. So we're proud of our collaborative research. We're proud of our generated research that we've generated on our own. And we are really excited about the opportunities on the advocacy, analytical, and research front in the years ahead. So I think we are on our last slide for the formal presentation. I see some questions in the Q&A. Please do add your questions. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't encourage you to follow us on all of our social media channels. If you have questions, There's our email. You can also link to us online, sign up for our mailing list, and of course, visit the Zoning Atlas. I think with that, we should turn to questions. Okay, so the first question is, are there plans to make research results or zoning code data accessible for use by third parties, whether that's developers or technology companies? What are the terms or process for accessing and utilizing this information? And Miri and Tara, I might take that one if that's all right with you guys, because I have an easy answer for that. And that is that at some point we hope to do that. We have a very small, we have an amazing and large team of analysts and people that are working on coding the data. We have a very small one-man band team when it comes to research. And so we've been fairly limited in what we can do in terms of packaging research for third parties. I would encourage you to reach out to me, and I'll put my email in the chat if you'd be interested in that. And if and when we get the capacity to help license, to provide the opportunity to license it to third parties, we will, but we are not set up to do that yet. We know it's of interest to a lot of different groups. So to keep tuned on social media, or reach out to me directly, and we will let you know if and when we are able to make that happen. Okay, so next question. Does the Atlas account for state laws like the recently passed SB 79 that affects TOD? I was surprised to see the parking minimums on the BART line in the East Bay. So I'll pitch this question over to Miri and Tara. SB 79, hot off the presses. Doesn't show up in the Atlas yet.
Anything that hasn't had the time to make its way into the municipal code is not going to show up on the atlas. We look a lot, something specifically that we're looking out for is SB 9 units, Senate Bill 9. That's the additional dwelling unit that's required for single family homes. Something interesting about the way that we log that is that a lot of municipalities will end up restricting the size of these SB9 second homes. So, depending on the way that the municipality is allowing these SB9 units, sometimes we end up logging them as ADUs, and sometimes they're logged as like an entire additional unit. So, that really just depends on the way that the municipality is incorporating them into the code.
And do you all want to talk about how we sometimes see California jurisdictions reference state statutes that have been passed? So in the text, I understand that sometimes they'll simply refer to a statutory provision, and then we have to figure out what they're what they're talking about. I don't know if you've come up with come into if you have a recent example or another way that you've seen a local entity refer to a state statute obliquely or direct.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes they're very, very well incorporated, and other times they're not. So it really just depends. Um, and you get to a point where if you're just a person reading this municipal code, it's hard to understand how exactly a certain state statute might be enforced. Sometimes that's really difficult to discern from just reading the municipal code. Um, but yeah, sometimes it's like fully incorporated and it tells you this is exactly how you can do it. And then other times there's like a vague reference to, by the way, remember Senate Bill 9, that's allowed. And that's not really super helpful from the point of view of someone who's just interpreting the code.
Just as a follow-up to that, on the question of TOD, transit-oriented development, Miri, I'd be interested to know what we've seen when it comes to transit-oriented development. It seems like we're all over the map. So the question about we're still seeing parking minimums on the BART line. Do you want to talk about how a user could see transit-oriented stations on our map, and the opportunity toggle that on and off. And then again, if you've noticed anything like transit-oriented zones.
Yes, I do know that on our atlas we do have the option to toggle on and off the TOD um, districts. I'm not entirely familiar with those, to be honest. I personally haven't like run across any of these often, but yeah, I do know that they are mentioned in the codes as well. So yeah, I don't really have much to say on that one, personally.
Tara, have you
Um,
seen TOD? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I can jump in for this one. We have on our like public atlas viewer, you can turn on and off transit stations, so you can see exactly where different kinds of housing development are allowed around these transit stations. Um, I have to say that I've seen actually a lot of this in Colorado as well, is something that's a little bit more specific to transit development. Within California, I know that with our state laws and ADUs, if you have a property within half a mile of a transit station, then that restricts that gets rid of your parking requirement for ADUs.
And those are the kinds of things that if it hasn't made it into the local code, we prioritize what the local code says. At some point in the future, we will be able to show or log state overrides as we look in other states, including Massachusetts, which just did a big transit-oriented, not just a couple of years ago, a transit-oriented development bill. That bill required local governments in Massachusetts that had MBTA stations to update their zoning code themselves. So now we are finally, a couple of years later, seeing the local governments updating their own codes. That it differs in different states when they have these statewide mandates. But in Massachusetts, we're going to be able to log that we are logging that compliance. And there's just a few jurisdictions left that still have to go through the process. And the state in that case too decides whether a jurisdiction is compliant. So we know TOD is a big issue around the country. Different states are requiring local governments to do different things. For now, we are logging what the local codes say, and as they're updated, we will update them. I should add that we are going to do a full round. We're almost at the finish line in California, and then we're all going to go back to California, go back through the jurisdictions, and do an update probably for very tail end of 2025, early 2026. So we'll be going back through the 539 jurisdictions again to get everything updated, because some of the data is from a couple of years ago, just because of how long it's taken to get through the state. We think the update will be a little easier because we have at least a base to reference. But we'll let you know in 6 to 9 months how that went. I see another question in the chat about when there are two versions of a program within a municipal code. For example, the questioner says that they know, at least in the past, that the San Francisco zoning code had a local accessory dwelling unit program prior to the passage of state laws on ADUs, as well as a state ADU program in their code that was added to ensure compliance with state law. Have you, maybe you can't, I'm not sure if you can speak to San Francisco offhand, but have you seen, especially in California, two sets of, for example, ADU regulations, or maybe just generally, when you see conflicting provisions, how do you go about resolving them?
Um, I can take this one. I feel like I see conflicting provisions all the time. This isn't exclusive to California. You see it everywhere. Especially when there's some kind of let's say there's like state legislation that overrides what they previously had in a municipality. Sometimes they will just add that and they won't necessarily get rid of the previous regulation that was not in compliance. Um, and so when you get to a point right there, then um, you we do our best to log the data as it is written in the code. which a lot of times requires a judgment call of what makes the most sense here and like what can we tell that the municipality meant by this. Um, yeah. Mary, do you have anything to add?
I think I would second that too. Yeah, I think just looking overall at the jurisdiction as well, like depending on what we see in the code, would this be weird? Is this what they're intending? And then, yeah, I think most of the time when we do have these overlaps, it is judgment call based on what we've seen in the jurisdiction as a whole.
And I know too, especially I think you did this too in Colorado, Tara. Sometimes we just have to call the planners and say, all right, what's going on here? Which one of these is the supersedes the other? Can you give me some background? Certainly that was the case. It has been the case in Texas, and we have a lot of small towns too that have bits and pieces, not in California necessarily, but around the country that will have bits and pieces of their codes adopted at different times, and then you're trying to piece them together and not quite sure how everything fits together, as well as I think an issue with text sometimes, where a jurisdiction will adopt an ADU ordinance that is supposed to be part of the zoning code, but it might actually be in a separate file in the municipal ordinance. So when we're looking in what they have in the zoning code for ADUs, and we have to say, okay, wait, let's just make sure, let's search the whole municipal code, and then we find it somewhere else. So we've seen it all, I think, at this point across our team, as to how these conflicts can come about. And I would be remiss if I didn't point people to an article in Zoning Practice that was written by two of our analysts, Jonah Palikia and Melissa Hayashida, and it's called Map to Text Discrepancies. And that write-up really talks about it, differences between the map and the text, made up zoning districts, expired districts, uh, districts that have sub-districts that only exist in the map and not the text, and so on. They found that about a third of jurisdictions had a serious, a significant map to text discrepancy. So this is what we're dealing with, but this is, I think, why we're all motivated, because it's a really big challenge to do what we're doing, and it's almost like it's a bit of a puzzle, and I think pretty interesting as well. So I think we are at time, but I wanted to thank Diana Drogaris, who's behind the scenes managing the webinar and preparing everybody for it, and as always leading our event series. So thank you, Diana. Thanks to Mary, Tara, Joanna Kaufman, who's our project manager on the California team, and all of the folks on the California team, existing and future, as we look toward that next update, both within our team and outside of our team. So we really appreciate everybody for being here. Thanks again for joining us, and stay tuned, because we've got some pretty exciting events coming up soon, including a report from Maine, other side of the country. Thanks, everybody.